Hi there! Welcome to my video where I'm going to be talking about the other type of mutation. This time we're talking about chromosomal mutations which occur from abnormal meiosis. So some of the things that we should be able to do at the end of the video is be able to recognize the different types of mutations, be able to look at nondisjunction, how nondisjunction occurs, and understand the difference between a monosomy and a trisomy. So we are going to talk specifically just about chromosomal mutations. Point or gene mutations are the ones that I talked about in the previous video. And I talked about mutagens causing them. Mutagens could be like radiation, it could be like things like benzene from the car that react with your DNA, things that look like nitrogen bases, okay, or different metals or bacteria or viruses that can actually insert their own DNA into yours, or things that bind to your nucleotides. So any of these things could be mutagens that if you expose your body to them, it's going to increase the chance of having a mutation occur, whether it's a point or gene mutation or chromosomal mutation. So what are chromosomal mutations? The ones that we're talking about today. So it's either changing the structure of the chromosome or the number of the chromosomes, whether it's one more or one less or two more. These are all options. Normally a human cell has 46 chromosomes in it, or 23 pairs, so we call it a diploid cell. In a chromosomal mutation, a person could be born with 45, 47, or even 48 chromosomes, and that would be a mutation in their DNA. So how does this actually happen? So if we remember to mitosis, we have our cells line up. And if our cells hypothetically didn't separate properly in anaphase, so instead of the sister chromatids separating and going to opposite poles, maybe one of the chromosomes sticks together and moves all together to one side. We wouldn't end up with 4 individual chromatids or chromosomes on this side and 4 on this side. Instead, you would end up with 5 on the top, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And on the bottom, you would end up with 1, 2, 3. So that's where we would have abnormal amounts of chromosomes in our cells. Specifically though, this is usually happening during meiosis. So a cell is being created, a sperm or an egg cell is being created, and this is happening specifically during anaphase, one of the anaphases. So when this happens and the chromosome sticks together or homologous pair sticks together, it's called nondisjunction, and it can either happen during anaphase 1 or anaphase 2. So in anaphase 1, because in metaphase 1 the homologous pairs line up, and in anaphase 1 they'll normally separate. If a non-disjunction happens during anaphase 1, the homologous chromosomes will stay together and move together to the opposite pole. Anaphase 2, this time the 2 sister chromatids that make up a replicated chromosome will stay together and move to the opposite pole, kind of like what I showed you in the picture on the last slide. So we have this picture in our notes so you guys can kind of see what I'm talking about. So this would be the first option of what would happen if we had a non-disjunction. So the homologous chromosomes pair up and then they normally separate, but this homologous pair is staying on the one side. So instead of them separating properly, you're going to end up with abnormal numbers of chromosomes in your cells. So if we look at the bottom, you would have in 2 of your cells n plus 1. So instead of having 23 chromosomes, we would have 24 in each of these. And then this one has n minus 1. So in human cells, you would have 22 instead of 23. So that's happening in anaphase 1. All 4 of my cells in this option are not the correct number of chromosomes. In the option where anaphase 2 is where the non-disjunction occurs, this time I have 24, 22, but I still have a 23 and a 23 cell. So only half of my cells, if it happens during anaphase 2, would be incorrect number of chromosomes. So this is a little bit less detrimental if it happens during anaphase 2. But it could happen during either of these to produce a chromosomal mutation. So if it's happening during anaphase 1, we just have to write down that this time 2 gametes have extra, 2 gametes have 1 less, so all 4 of them are not the correct number of chromosome. If it's happening during anaphase 2, we have 1 that has an extra, 1 that has 1 less, and 2 of them are still the right number of chromosomes. So it's a little bit less bad if it happens during anaphase 2. So, speaking of non-disjunctions, and some of them having more and some of them having less, we use the word trisomy to represent if we have an extra chromosome, because normally we have all of our chromosomes paired up. But if you have an extra chromosome, you would have, instead of a pair, you would have a trio of chromosomes on one of the pairs. So we call it a trisomy because you have three homologous chromosomes that are paired up with one another. The example that's super common in the population is trisomy 21, also known as Down syndrome, because they have three chromosome 21s. Monosomy, on the other hand, is when they have only one of their homologous chromosomes instead of having a pair, which they normally would have two. So mono as in one, because they only have one in the pair. And the example that we'll talk about later is Turner syndrome. They only have one X chromosome instead of two X's or an X and a Y. So that's called Turner syndrome. So Down syndrome is a really, really common thing in our population. If we were going to look at all of their pairs of chromosomes and we line them up, we would look at the 21st pair, and the 21st pair is the one that has three of them. This is really common in the population because your 21st chromosome is actually the smallest of all of them that we have in our DNA. So that means that it carries the least amount of genetic information, which means that if you have an extra one, it's going to be the least detrimental to your cell survival. So you can still survive and be a productive member of society with a couple of different symptoms. So yes, we have 47 chromosomes. It's 1 in 600 babies are born with Down syndrome. And as the mother ages, the chances of having a baby with Down syndrome increases, especially after the age of 35 for women. Again, mutagens, those are things that we expose our body to, would increase the chance. And someone with Down syndrome would have a little bit lower mental capacity, and they usually don't live as long. So the other type of thing that we could have happen if we have a chromosomal mutation is something called Klinefelter syndrome. This person has two X's and a Y. So if we saw a person with Klinefelter syndrome, because they have the female chromosomes and a male chromosome, they would have male reproductive organs. So they would have a penis, but they would also have female secondary sex characteristics. So, for example, maybe developing breasts, maybe wider hips, because they also are getting those female things. So, this person would have two X's and a Y. They are genetically male and female. So their actual reproductive organs would present themselves as male, but they would not be fertile. So they would not be able to produce sperm properly because of the female hormones in their body. So they might not actually know that they have Klinefelter syndrome until very later in life, because on the outside exterior, it looks as if they are genetically male. Turner syndrome is the one that I talked about that is a monosomy. Normally, monosomies would not happen, but the interesting thing, because females get two X's, some places in your body you actually turn off one of your X's. So this person can survive totally fine. They would present themselves as female because they do not have a Y chromosome, even though they do not have two X's, but that's the only other option. So yeah, that's Turner syndrome. So we also have a couple of other options where it would be on the sex chromosomes where this trisomy would be. So XYY or triple X syndrome are all options. So XYY can be called like super male. So 1 in 1,000 males are born with this. They're not affected with their IQ. They might have some learning difficulties, but they would have like excess secondary sex characteristics that males have. So, for example, acne, they might be very tall, sometimes more aggressive because of all the testosterone that their body's producing. And then triple X would be a female because she only has X chromosomes, has an extra X chromosome. There might be language development that delays. They might be a little bit taller and reduces their IQ, but just a little bit. So again, 1 in 1,000 females could be born with this. So a little bit more common than the last one that we talked about. These ones are really, really, really sad because these babies usually do not live very long. So trisomy 18, life expectancy about 10 weeks. So because of their defects that they're born with, because of the information that's carried on the 18th chromosome, their cells can't kind of understand what to do, and some of them don't develop properly, and these babies are usually not super healthy, and they're born with severe defects and end up not surviving. Same with Patou's syndrome, which is trisomy 13. Again, on the 13th chromosome, if they had an extra one, your cells wouldn't be able to read what's kind of happening. And again, really, really short life expectancies. So super sad ones also are a thing. And then Fragile X is not actually a chromosomal mutation where it's a monosomy or a trisomy. They just have an abnormality with the way that their X chromosome is shaped. So they have these little spots at the bottom of their X chromosomes where they're missing pieces of DNA. So usually ends up being an intellectual disability. And those are all of the different options of monosomy, trisomy, and the different chromosomal abnormalities that we could have that we're going to talk about in Bio 30. So yeah, basically just an abnormal number of chromosomes, or maybe possibly just their chromosomes not looking like they should, is a chromosomal mutation. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, please feel free to ask, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!